Absolutely loaded mailbag today, including, is Rays shortstop Junior Caminero a top 25 prospect at the end of 2023? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, editor-in-chief of BraveToday.com, freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen. Every single day, we're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is all from our listeners. If you have a question for a Mailbag Monday, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop your questions into Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. First question comes from one of our everydayers, Jake Larson on Twitter. Asked about Rays shortstop Junior Caminero. What are the odds that he's a top 25 prospect by the end of the season? I tend to think it's probably more likely he's a top 50 than a top 25. But kind of a reminder here, 2019 IFA, actually by the Guardians, didn't get to debut until 2021. Tampa Bay Rays traded for him at the deadline. They sent a pitcher, Tobias Myers, that was going to have to go on the 40-man roster. Did a typical Rays thing like they do. They found a guy that wasn't going to fit on their 40-man, sent him out, brought in somebody else who, lots of upside, pretty far away. The Guardians already DFA'd Myers, and the Rays now have Junior Caminero. Thing here, so last year, 63 games combined between rookie ball and low A. Almost not quite evenly split, 36 games in rookie, 26 in low A Charleston, but 314, 384, 498, 11 home runs, 20 extra base hits, 23 walks to 43 strikeouts in 63 games, 12 of 13 on stolen bases. And I think that only 43 strikeouts in 63 games is one of the reasons why we're so high on Junior Caminero. It's something where the hit tool isn't on its face that impressive, but the power, I think, is probably plus power potential. I mean, now at age 19, and I'll get to that in a second. But I've been really impressed when I've watched about both his hands and his approach. As a youngster, obviously still has some issues as far as not getting fooled on a breaking pitch or an off speed or a fastball, but I've noticed that his hands he's able to keep his hands behind the ball even when he is fooled and maybe he's early on a swing. So really impressive there. He's in high A Bowling Green this year, and it's because he's got to go on the 40-man after this season, despite barely having an experience. That's one of the other side effects of the COVID year that we haven't really talked about a lot. But so far in high A Bowling Green, 16 games, 373, 417, 702, 6 home runs, 9 extra base hits, 4 walks to 18 strikeouts, 1 for 2 on stolen bases. I think the power is plus. I think the hit tool is probably average or so, but he's going to draw some walks, disregarding what he's done in Bowling Green this year with only 4 in 16 games. But I do think ultimately where he ends up in that top 50 or top 25, and I'm more confident on a top 50 than I am a top 25, but I think where he ends up depends on the defense. It's really hard for a one-dimensional player, an offensive-only player, to get high in the rankings if he's deficient defensively. His arm is plus, but the actual defense itself isn't that great. His speed isn't that great, and really the issues are his range and agility, right? So he's played some third, he's played some second. He has the arm to play right field, I think. It's just a question of defensively, where is he going to stay? Can he improve the agility, especially as he continues to get old? He's 19 years old. As he continues to get older, put on a little bit of size, hopefully all healthy weight. But as he continues to do that, where does he end up defensively? If he can stay in the infield, particularly if he can stay at somewhere like third, I think there's a chance that he may get up there in the rankings a little bit higher. If he has to kick inside to second, or if he has to go out to the outfield, you're probably looking at it a little bit less value defensively from him. But either way, I think he could be a top 50 guy by the end of the year if he continues to hit with the slash line of 370, 420, 700. That's definitely going to make him a top 50 prospect. In that same question, Jake asked about the Taj Bradley demotion. That's 100% service time manipulation. Let's be completely honest with what that is. That is something they are trying to avoid the Super 2 deadline. They do not want him to get an extra year of arbitration. It's the top 22% of players on service time from between 2 and 3 years. And so what you have to do is you have to, in essence, keep a guy down for a little bit longer in the year. I think that's what this is. As somebody who has Taj Bradley in redraft, I'm keeping Taj Bradley. I'm not letting Taj Bradley go. I think he'll be back up soon, but it 100% feels like a service time manipulation issue more so than trying to acclimate him from a 6-man rotation to a 5-man rotation. That's a dumb excuse. I think it's a service time manipulation. Brian in our Discord asked about the debut of Joey Ortiz for the Orioles. 2019 fourth rounder out of New Mexico State, and actually tied an Orioles record in his first game. So he gets called up. He starts at second base. And this is something where it just kind of worked out well for him because the Orioles were going into a 4-game series in Detroit. And they knew they were going to have 3 lefty starters in the game. They wanted a right-handed bat in the lineup. They have a lot of lefties in the lineup. And so they took Adam Frazier, who's a lefty and is struggling. The backup, I think Taran Vavra, hasn't played a ton, also a lefty. And so they brought Ortiz in, started him at second base, batted him 9th. And he got a hit and 3 RBIs in his debut. And so what that meant, that tied the Orioles record for RBIs in a debut with Don Baylor in 1970. As far as the franchise, not just the Baltimore Orioles record, but the franchise record was 4 RBIs in 1951. But the Baltimore record, the Orioles record, was 1970 and Don Baylor, and then Ortiz tied it. For the series, 2 of 8, 4 RBIs, a run and a strikeout. Got sent back down over the weekend once the series was over. This year in AAA in 16 games, 359, 389, 500. No home runs, but 7 extra base hits. 5 walks to 12 strikeouts, 1 for 1 on stolen bases. Last year, in almost 140 games, he had just under 20 home runs. And so power's not a huge part of his game. He's got fantastic contact ability. The pull side power is starting to get better. He's starting to get better at pull side power. Obviously, in Baltimore, that doesn't help a ton. You've got that giant wall out there. As a right-handed hitter, you're hitting it to the deep giant field wall in left field. But he is a true shortstop. He can play shortstop at a very, very good level. And so I think this gives you options as far as if you want to move a prospect, because you have a ton of infield prospects if you're the Baltimore Orioles. If you want to move a prospect, Joey Ortiz is now a very attractive piece for teams to go out and get. He had 2 hits in his first 3 games, played second base very well, can play shortstop very well, above average speed, above average arm. Again, plus defender who could kick out to third, could kick in the second, probably has the speed to step up a little bit in the outfield. So worst case scenario, you're looking at a utility guy, but a team that needs help at shortstop, I'm thinking like a Los Angeles Dodgers, you could see them make a deal where they offer some pitching in exchange for Joey Ortiz, or they go out and get Jorge Mateo, and you have Gunnar Henderson at third, and you have Joey Ortiz at short. So I think there's a couple different options you could see here. In just a minute, I want to get to some questions about the Houston Astros and the New York Mets. But first, this episode's brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, you need the best tasting protein bar ever. If you're like me, you want a healthier snack choice, but you don't want to compromise on taste, Built Bars and Built Puffs are for you. They're healthy and they taste amazing, and they taste so good that you won't believe they're good for you. What makes them great? 1, covered 100% real chocolate. The flavors are fantastic: churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. And the macros are great. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. So you can go to Built.com and buy yourself a box. We've talked about that for years and years. But You can go to your local Walmart or Sam's and pick them up as well. Walmart in the pharmacy section, a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, of double chocolate bar, or of coconut puff. Or you can go to Sam's Club and get a 13-bar box of the brownie batter puff and the churro puff. Everything else, Built.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends with Betterhelp. It is very easy to get caught up in what everyone needs for you and not take a moment to think about what you need for yourself. But when you spend all of your time giving, it can leave you feeling stretched thin and burned out. I am a person, so I write, again, I'm editor-in-chief of BravesToday.com, so I'm writing about the Atlanta Braves there. I'm doing this podcast, which is a daily podcast, so it's 5 or more episodes a week. I also do have a full-time job and a family. I recently had to step back a bit from some of the college baseball coverage that I was doing because I was stretched too thin. And therapy was a great tool to help me understand the proper balance in my life. The goal here is so you can support others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You will get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Okay, continuing with your questions. This one's from Adam on YouTube, and he asks, is Yainer Diaz or Korey Lee, which of those catchers is the heir apparent to Martin Maldonado in Houston? And to me, I feel like they want it to be Korey Lee. So the story on these two guys, Korey Lee is the better defender, which is what you've gotten from Martin Maldonado, and Diaz is the better offensive hitter. And to kind of illustrate some of this, so Lee this year, 2019 first rounder out of Cal, he's in AAA, 22 games, 258, 312, 326. 1 home run, 4 extra base hits, 6 walks to 26 strikeouts. I like Korey Lee's defense a lot. It feels like, the arm is legitimately an 80-grade arm. He's above average when it comes to blocking, to framing. He's really good at a lot of those different aspects, but the big thing is he has the big arm to help with the running game. Now, so much of stolen bases is more on the pitcher than it is on the catcher, but back picks, things like that can still help, as well as when you have a pitcher that isn't as good at holding the runner on, Korey Lee's arm, the accurate throws he can make can help you get some of those guys. The pop times are virtually elite, but he needs to improve the offense. 2021 and some in 2022, we saw some of the very, very good swing decisions that he had kind of back up a bit because he was going for more power. So yes, he ended up with 25 home runs, but the batting average on the on base dropped a little bit. We've seen him make the adjustment kind of to go back to more of the contact focused approach. Again, batting 260 in AAA right now. Batting on base over 300. But you would like to see him get back to those more elite levels that he was in. If he can add the home runs, that's great. But this is a team that will crush a ton of home runs, so you don't have to have him as a power hitter. Yainer Diaz, by contrast, defensively is very much a work in progress. He's a good thrower, so the arm is good. He's not a great blocker. And then he struggles as far as the game calling. And some of that can be mitigated if you have veteran pitchers, which Houston does. If you have a Framber Valdez, he's probably calling his own game. A Christian Javier, Lance McCullers, they're probably calling their own games. But young pitchers like Hunter Brown are going to need a catcher back there who can help them with that. So what's happened is you see a lot of starts for Yainer Diaz in the minors at first base and things like that. I think the best scenario here, and he's having a rough start to his 2023 MLB year, 10 games, 214, 273, 286, 2 extra base hits, 2 walks to 7 strikeouts. I really think the optimal scenario here is if Korey Lee's offense picks up a little bit, so he can be the everyday guy. Yainer Diaz's offense gets back to the historic levels. He in In AAA Sugarland last year in 48 games, he batted .294, .342, .587. It's in there. Like, the bat is in there. If he can get back to that kind of production, then Korey Lee's your starting catcher. He's defensively strong. He gives you enough offensively. You can bat him eighth. It's fine. Yainer Diaz can be your guy that can play some first base. He can catch a day or two a week. He can play DH. He can DH a little bit if you have an open spot. If Jordan's not using that, he can play some first base for you as well. I think that's probably the best way for this to work out. Jeremy in our Discord asked about shortstop Jett Williams of the Mets. 2022 first rounder out of high school, and I love what they're doing with him in low A because they're moving him around a little bit, and specifically to the outfield. So the story here is he's a plus hitter, high on base percentage kind of guy. Reminds me, not a comp, but reminds me a lot of what Brandon Nimmo is, right? The issue with Jett Williams, 5'8", 175 is the frame. And guys like that historically don't have great power. You have exceptions to that, guys who can hit for power like Pedroia did from time to time, Jose Altuve, almost had Abreu, Jose Altuve, things like that. But for the most part, I think he's going to be a plus hitter, with high on base, lower powered numbers. He plays kind of aggressively. It's almost that thing where like he's got the chip on his shoulder because he's a smaller guy and that kind of feels like a thing, but it's not out of control, right? He's very good at making contact and making quality contact. So getting everything out of that 5'8" frame. But I think it's just ultimately the power is going to be below average. The speed is plus. The defense, he's fine. He's not anything exceptional in defense. The arm is fine, but they've started using him some in center field. And I think that's the best way to look at how to use Jett Williams is like a center field, second base kind of profile. Again, similar to what Nimmo did. And it feels kind of like he's going to be your spiritual successor to Brandon Nimmo as that guy who's going to bat leadoff. He's going to go out there and get on base a ton, and he's going to run. His stats right now, 16 games in low A. This is through Saturday. 16 games in low A, 241, 453, 370, 1 home run, 4 extra base hits, 15 walks to 15 strikeouts, 5 and 9 on stolen bases. So 5 stolen bases already, on base of 453. Like I said, very, very good contact ability, very good hitter, very good, going to have a great on-base percentage. And again, he's your spiritual successor to Brandon Nimmo. Brian in our Discord asked about Joey Ortiz, also asked about Brandon Marsh. Is the Brandon Marsh breakout legit? I think it is. So if you'll remember, this was the Logan O'Hoppe for Brandon Marsh trade between the Angels and the Phillies. And Brandon Marsh has made a couple changes. He was 2016 draftee by the Angels in the second round. Made some changes since he's gotten to the Phillies, and you can see it in the stats. So with the Angels, and in MLB, 163 games, so just over 1 full year. 239, 299, 354. 10 home runs, 36 extra base hits, 42 walks to 208 strikeouts. With the Phillies, he's got 67 games, so smaller sample size, but batting average of 308, on base of 362, slugging of 537. So the on base went up almost 70 points. I'm sorry, the batting average went up almost 70 points. The on base went up 63 points, and the slugging went up 180 or so points. 7 home runs, 29 extra base hits, 18 walks, 268 strikeouts. Strikeout rate's down, walk rate is up. Kevin Long, the hitting coach for the Phillies, gets a ton of credit here. So does Brandon Marsh for the work he did. He made 3 real kind of changes here. The first one is he has a new approach at the plate. And so he has been more selective of, when he actually tries to, like when he actually swings and what he swings at. So rate of swings in the zone from his time with the Angels to his time with the Phillies has dropped from 65% to 61%. Not huge, but his contact rate in the zone went from 78% to 84%. So he's making better quality contact in the zone. He's making more contact in the zone while swinging at pitches in the zone less. His chase rate dropped from 30% to 25%. His whiff rate, so swing and miss, dropped from 31% to 23%. But here's the big difference. His percentage of swings on the first pitch went from 29.4% to 13.5%. So he's a lot more selective early in the count, which helps him get ahead of pitchers and get better quality pitches to hit later in the at-bat. He did some work on the swing. Kevin Long said he noticed that Brandon Marsh was struggling to catch up to fastballs, so they have him a little more, instead of saying so upright, they have him a little more kind of in a crouch so that his hands are lower, closer into the body, and he can get them extended quicker. And then he's just been a lot better against lefties. They're kind of protecting him a little bit more as far as not having him face lefties as much. But even then, they've worked with some of his timing, some of his pitch recognition to get him better against lefties. And with the Angels, he started like three-fourths of the time against lefties, but he hit .227 against them and had a strikeout rate near 40%. Now he's batting .350 with a .780 slugging percentage. Already has 2 homers, already has 4 doubles against lefties this in like 25 plate appearances, whereas it was like 150 with the Angels. But they're still picking and choosing when he does it a lot more. Now, with Christian Pache being out, I don't know if that's going to change. The other things I will bring attention to is Brandon Marsh's batting average on balls in play is very high. Hit .469 BABIP right now. League average is .296. Now, guys who are fast and hit the ball hard typically outperform their BABIP because they have a better chance of beating out infield hits. His career mark is .386. But even off of his career mark, this is still high. So that should come down. His weighted on-base average versus his expected on-base average. He has the second largest gap between those two. So he is outplaying his expected performance right now. That's going to back up some, but I do think this new Brandon Marsh is legitimate. So very excited to see how he continues to improve going forward. In just a minute, got a couple low A outfielders to talk about, as well as the idea of floating down a draft pick. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends with eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit, and it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage. Look for the green check mark to know the part will fit or your money back. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. The eBay Guaranteed Fit's only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Okay, wrapping up our Mailbag Monday. Quick preview for tomorrow. We're having a crossover with our buddy JD of Locked On Cardinals. We're talking about the Jordan Walker demotion, what some of their pitchers have looked like so far in AAA. Going to be a fun episode. In the meantime, John on YouTube had a question. We talked on Thursday about the Seattle Mariners and what they can do in the draft, and he asked about the concept of floating down a draft pick. How does that work? And the simple version of this is part of scouting, part of getting ready for the draft is making contact with the player and their representatives and finding out their salary demands. And so the concept of floating down a draft pick is you go to a player who's expected to be drafted higher, and you tell them, in essence, we will pay you either the money you would have made if you were picked, say, top 5, or we'll pay you over that, or even significantly over that, for you to tell other teams that your salary demands are very, very high so that they don't draft you and you fall to us, and we will pay you this money. It is to kind of like illustrate how this could work. Look at last year. The Mets had 2 picks in the top 15. So the Orioles were picking first overall. The slot for the second overall pick was like $8.2 million. The Mets had $9.1 million for their slot value for their 2 picks in the first round. So let's say the Mets decided they want to sign Drew Jones, who ended up going to Arizona. They could go to Drew Jones and say, hey, we will pay you $9 million if you tell these other teams that you don't want to sign for anything less than this so that you're on the board when we pick. Now, is there a possibility that a team could say, okay, yeah, we'll pay that and go ahead and draft him? That's possible, but it's very, very unlikely. The way that this slotting stuff works, for the most part, is you're telling teams, you're not giving them exact amounts. You're telling them, I have an offer for significantly over slot, or you're telling them, I have an agreement with the team. I'm going to stay on the board and let them take me because I'm paying them a lot of money. And if you draft me, I'm not going to sign. So it's not necessarily the threat of having to pay you all of the money. It's the threat of, I'm not going to sign if you take me. And let's say that happened to Drew Jones. If that situation happened, if Drew Jones gets drafted, let's say by the Reds, instead of making it to the Mets, he could tell the Reds, I'm not going to sign. You lose that first round pick. He can go to junior college for a year and then come back and get drafted the next year and get that same money or more. So a lot of teams, if they're told an exceptionally high number from a pick when they're trying to figure out slotting and everything, they understand, okay, he has an agreement with a team. We're just going to skip it. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to bother it. There's also a little bit of a gentleman's agreement thing there, because if you have an agreement with a guy as well, the last thing that they want to do is you don't want your agreement blown up by somebody else. Brock Porter last year was a great example of this. Brock Porter was a first-round talent, and he lasted to the Rangers draft in the 4th round because he had an agreement with the Rangers ahead of time, and his agent told other teams, do not draft him. He will not sign. We have an agreement with somebody else. So there you go. Again, a lot of it's that gentleman's agreement thing is kind of why they don't necessarily blow those agreements up by drafting a guy anyway, even though he has a verbal agreement with somebody else. Tracer2 on Twitter asked me about two lower minors outfielders, Kyle Nevin of the Dodgers and Wade Meckler of the Giants. Both their performance looks great right now. How do you necessarily evaluate these guys at such low levels? So Kyle Nevin, 2022 11th rounder out of Baylor. His father is Phil Nevin, GM of the Angels. His brother is, I think it's Tyler Nevin of the Orioles. So 16 games in low A this year, 385, 459, 508, no home runs, 7 extra base hits, 9 walks to 17 strikeouts, 1 for 3 on stolen bases. Trying to figure out, is this low A stat line right in Rancho Cucamonga? He's 21 years old, so he's somewhat age appropriate for the level. That's a standard. That's common. He feels like he's a little bit old, but he's somewhat appropriate for the level. Looking at the actual tools, you're not seeing home runs. He actually hasn't hit a home run yet. He got 20 games last year between rookie ball and low A, and then now 16 games in low A this year, still hasn't hit a home run. So you're waiting for that power to translate. And then they've decided if they want him to play infield over outfield, and he played infield some at Baylor as well, but 10 starts at third base this year, 5 at left, 2 at first base. I like the approach. I think the speed is fine. Stat-wise, it's too small of a sample size yet to know much about his true ability for his hit tool and his power tool, other than it looks like his power tool may not be great, and he probably needs to move to a different level. I mean, 385, 459, 508. 385 batting average is a pretty good sign that you're at the wrong level. So give him a little more time. Let's see if that stabilizes. And if it stays that high, they're probably going to move him to high A, and we'll have a little bit of a better idea. Guy that is in high A, Wade Meckler, 2022 8th rounder out of Oregon State. I got to watch him in Super Regionals last year. He faced off against Auburn. And 12 games in high A so far this year, 489, 538, 689. Talking about a guy that has a ridiculous slash line. 490, 540, 690. 1 home run, 7 extra base hits, 6 walks to 6 strikeouts, 1 for 1 on stolen bases. The hit tool, I've been calling it an average hit tool. Again, small sample size, might be a little bit better than that. Need to kind of watch and see a little bit more. The quality of the contact, despite the power not being amazing, the quality of the contact's been pretty good. But the big thing here is the speed. Somewhat close to 70 speed. And so can wreak a lot of havoc on the base paths. The arm isn't particularly great. And so it's something where he can play center field at an average level. If he can improve the reads, routes, reactions to stick in center field, that would be great, because if he has to move to a corner, he has to move to left because of the arm. The arm's below average, solidly below average. And so that means you're in an unusual profile of a non-power hitting left fielder, which is not as valuable as a lot of teams could use. Another situation where you want a bigger track record than this, he was in low A for 11 games last year after 12 games in rookie ball. So 35 total games in the bigs. We need more of a sample size to know exactly where all of these numbers, including the power, are going to stabilize. But it definitely gets your attention when you see a 489 batting average. Final question from Tyler via email. Should the Angels move to Trey Cabbage at first base until Jared Walsh comes back? They absolutely should. He's got 24 games in AAA right now with the Salt Lake Bees. 348, 402, 708, 8 home runs, 14 extra base hits, 6 walks to 21 strikeouts, and 5 for 5 on stolen bases. The Angels' first basemen have not been great this year. They've not gotten very good production, and it depends on specifically which ones that you're looking at. But I think that Cabbage can be helpful playing first base as long as you protect him. So the current slash line for Angels first baseman, 293, 336, 472. A lot of that is carried by Brandon Drury and Gio Urshela. Jake Lamb has been 211, 268, 237. He's been awful at first base. Trey Cabbage can work if you only let him bat against righties. So Trey Cabbage as a against right-handed pitching. Last year, 395, 510, 855. You get him out there against a lefty, here's where the stats come down. 189, 250, 270. I would swap Jake Lamb for Trey Cabbage, give Trey Cabbage an opportunity to see if he can figure it out. The only question I have is I don't know if he's on the 40-man roster, so you'd have to make a move to do that. But either way, I definitely think Trey Cabbage deserves a shot to be the right-hand pitching side of that platoon at first base, simply because he has raked, including hitting one of the longest home runs in the minors this year at like 470-something feet. Fantastic week coming up this week. Reminder, if you have questions for the show, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop your questions in the Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Till tomorrow's show, remember, it's always a great time to play a minor leaguer.